I give way to the Honourable.
Difficult to disagree with anything that he's saying. Does he agree with me that a legal right to consular assistance would be one step in the right direction to help protect our citizens when they get into trouble abroad?
Well, I wouldn't be against it. But I won't go into that now. She'll forgive me. I'm sure she can make her case on that, and I'm sure happy to discuss it with her later on. But the reality is I want to return, because this is an opportunity to talk about one human being who is now likely, and he must believe, that given the way that the Chinese authorities are working, he will never see the light of day again. He'll never see his son. He'll never see his family ever again, because he took the brave choice to stay. He didn't run away. All those people that have left, quite legitimately, have had their bank accounts frozen. They've had their pension funds frozen illegally. It goes on. But Jimmy Lai stands like a beacon in the middle of this to say, no, no further. We will not put up with this. Freedom is our right. It's not something that we get given. It is our right. And clearly, he says, standing up for it. And here's what I always want to raise with my honourable friend, who is now going to defend the government's position on this. I use my words carefully. I noticed the Foreign Secretary has used this phrase, and we had this debate recently, and I know we didn't have an agreement, so I'm going to probe that lack of agreement further. The Foreign Secretary said, and I quote, I think, that in his conversations with the Chinese government, he said the Chinese government, deliberately target prominent pro-democracy figures, journalists and politicians in an effort to silence and discredit them. So far, so good. Detained British dual national Jimmy Lai, one such figure, he raised the case. Can I just pause there? Jimmy Lai is not a dual national. He has never had a Chinese passport. He has only had a British passport. He is a British citizen under British law and British protection. And he has appealed for that protection. His own defence counsels have reiterated the reality of the inability to mount a proper defence because they cannot get access to him, and now they've been barred from ever seeing him because they were too much trouble and causing problems. So the reality here is, and I just say this again, every time we say he is a dual national, it plays into the hands of the Chinese authorities. For they know that as a dual national, they can claim rights over his position, which they do not possess. And so he languishes as a result. Because as a dual national, they don't recognize other nationalities, and so they don't allow consular rights of access. Here is a big problem for us. And I call on my government today, please, again, just get to your feet, if you might. And could they say that we believe Jimmy Lai is a British citizen and British passport holder, full stop? We don't need to debate it, we just need to agree it. And I therefore claim that that is the problem. And I want to finish by saying simply that the UN has made recognitions. The United States has recognized him as a British citizen. The European Union has recognized him as a British citizen. The only country that I am aware of that does not recognize him as an out-and-out British citizen, why, that would be the United Kingdom. For some reason, we have reticence. And the second thing I want to say is that when they trashed the Sino-British agreement, the Chinese government, the Americans sanctioned 12 of the most senior people that were responsible. And the same in Xinjiang, by the way, they sanctioned something like that as well. We have sanctioned nobody in Hong Kong since the start of this saga. Why aren't we sanctioning them? Why are we so worried about what they might say or what they might do? And if, by the way, it's to get their help in doing all sorts of things like stopping Russians from having the war, when they're supplying them busily with weapons and parts and all sorts of stuff at the moment, when it comes to net zero, there's nothing zero about their net. It goes off the top of the chart, and we're the ones that are going to pick up the pieces. I simply say to my honourable friend, and I'm going to end here, Sally, please, 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 defend a British citizen. Proclaim it from the rooftops that the British government stands for freedom and human rights. And when a British passport holder and a British citizen is incarcerated, we will move heaven and earth and make all demands that that individual receives our full support, and that there is no way on earth that the normal access to justice will be blocked, for freedom must prevail.
It's good to see you, Chair. Let me thank the member for St Helens South and Whiston for securing the debate, and also it's always good to follow the right honourable member for Chingford and Woodford Green when we probably fundamentally agree completely on something. Now, I have to say it's probably not the first time that people have heard me rise to my feet in Westminster Hall to speak on this very subject, and I know for many today will have heard me speak about it before, and I'll do my best, Miss Allen, not to say something, to actually do say something new about the subject. There are many parts of the job that we are elected to do, which our constituents actually expect us to do. Making speeches is one of them, as is helping constituents with issues we all come up against as we deal with the authorities that be. Now, there are, of course, others you don't expect to be involved in. And I can say now, after 8 years in this place, that dealing with cases of our constituents who are themselves in some sort of distress, or getting contact on behalf of their family members who are, is certainly one of those things that you certainly don't prepare yourself before you're elected to this place. Now, whether it's distance, the unfamiliarity with the language and the culture, or just an enhanced feeling of helplessness, there is always a heightened feeling around such cases. And I'm afraid to say, Miss Ali, that the added extra in such cases always tends to be the disconnect, which is fairly unique in these instances between the UK citizen and their families involved in such cases expect, and what services are actually available to them, as I think was alluded to by the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green. Now, in this debate today, we're obviously talking about UK nationals imprisoned overseas, but much of what I will say will also apply to many of those who come into contact with consular services. Now, let's remind ourselves of the words which I think also the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green alluded to, which is the part of our passports, recently updated, of course. His Britannic Majesty's Secretary of State requests and requires in the name of His Majesty all those whom it may concern to allow the bearer to pass freely without let or hindrance, and to afford the bearer such assistance and protection as may be necessary. Now, I would say that how that's applied, for example, to prisoners, those accused or convicted of wrongdoing, are the very definition of vulnerable people at the mercy of the state and how it administers justice. Now, regardless of their culpability within that jurisdiction, Miss Ali, the very least the UK government can ask of countries in which its citizens are imprisoned is that they are treated consistently and fairly. Indeed, when I have previously spoken about the case of my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal, which alluded to by the Right Honourable Member for Rhondda, I used 3 words: transparency, due process and the rule of law. Now, these are 3 things that I would hope any Indian national imprisoned here in the UK could rely on, and should be the very least we should expect in Jagtar's case. Now, the case of my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal is a matter of public record, considerably so. And I've spoken in debates here and in actually the floor of the House on a number of occasions since Jagtar's initial detention in November 2018, coming up now for 6 years. Now, the circumstances of Jagtar's arrest, being snatched off the street by unidentified men, being held incommunicado, and then emerging, having signed a confession, which has later emerged has been extracted through torture, meant that the case got attention, Miss Ali. His family, though understandably frantic, managed to have the presence of mind to bring together many of the elements within the Scottish, UK and global Sikh diaspora that eventually became the Free Jaggi Now campaign, which has fought tirelessly on his behalf. Now, they also very quickly got in touch with their MP, and I raised it a point of order immediately, and the then Foreign Office Minister questions where the Minister at the dispatch box stated that the UK government, and I quote, take extreme action if a British citizen is being tortured. Words, I have to say, Miss Ali, which I and the family were surprised to hear at the time, and with which we seemed increasingly like a cruel joke for Jagtar and those close to him. Now, on one level, we were fortunate that there was the initial publicity in the case and that the Minister's words will have had at least made a case something of a priority. Not every UK citizen detained, and I say UK citizen, full UK national, will be able to say this. And as time has gone on, and I've heard more about the plight of those in similar positions, as has been spoken about today, the more I have seen the gap between the expectations of families and what the FCDO can deliver. Now, I should say something about the consular prison teams before I take their superiors to task. Now, along with the staff at Post in Delhi who have made great efforts to visit Jagtar, bringing news from home and taking notes from his family to him, the team in King Charles Street have really done their utmost to keep up the very good communications with the family, and even with the political aspects of the case were uncertain or indeed negative. The professionalism that they have shown has greatly appreciated by me and by the family, and their ability to go above and beyond, putting in the long hours in the offices at the top of corner of KCS. Never quite knowing, Miss Ali, when another crisis may strike is to be commended. So why do they remain so deprived of resources to do the job, which is very much the bare minimum which UK citizens should expect from their government? Now, whether I sit on these debates, I hear very much always the same list of grievances. I hear kind words from the front bench, and we continue to see the deprioritisation of consular budgets. Now, I should like to reference at this point the excellent report published by the All-Party Group for Deaths Abroad, Consular Services and Assistance, led by my very good friend, the member for Livingston. It's an APBG set up in the wake of similar realisation to one I have described with my constituent, and the report is a testament to the work that they did in giving these families a voice. Now, in full of the excellent recommendations to ensure that the importance of consular services is recognised and informed by the lived experience of those families, an attempt to ensure their trauma in such situations is recognised. Consular services should have a much clearer identity within the FCDO, and the obligations it has towards UK citizens should be stated in a much clearer manner. Now, one thing I would also hope that this approach would achieve is helping families navigate what can be quite an intimidating bureaucracy. Now, despite the initial statements about extreme action, we now appear to be getting ready to announce the UK-India Free Trade Agreement, quite a statement of priorities from the succession of governments. And I know that we need to come to a conclusion, Ms Ali. Very quickly, just conscious of time.
Wind up.
Okay, well, let me just say I could talk for 3 hours, Ms Ali, about a subject which is very close to my heart and my constituents. So let me do sum up. By referring back to those words of the passports, and I hope that the Minister takes note, this government and the one that is about to replace it needs to do much more to ensure that holders of that document, in quote, receive such assistance and protection as may be necessary. That means funding consular services properly. To lead is to choose, Miss Ali, and frankly, at the moment, they have chosen badly.
Hear, hear.
Delight to contribute to this debate under your chairmanship and leadership. And could I also congratulate the Honourable Member for St Helens South for her excellent introductory speech. And for any British national, the idea of being wrongfully detained abroad or denied true legal processes is bone-chilling. Kept away from friends and family, dealing with foreign laws and customs subject to, in some cases, arbitrary processes, and with an uncertain outcome. It's a situation none of us would want for any of our loved ones. And we saw how hard the member for Hampstead and Kilburn worked on freeing Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe along with her family, but we know that there are many of us also who are doing similar work in our own constituencies, including, in my own case, Aras Amiri, who was in the same prison as Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. And when someone is detained abroad, many people have the expectation that an official from the British High Commission or Embassy will provide advice and support until their return to the UK. And it's a great credit to our hard-working officials who do put in the hours abroad, the many visits to prisons, and that important link back with home. And I know all members will pay tribute to that important consular work that does go on day in, day out. Sadly, though, this is not the case in every single situation. We know from the member for Dunbar, who has talked about Jagtar Singh Johal, and the opportunity that the UK has right now to be talking publicly about that case. We know from the work of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, which the member for Rhondda has sat on for quite some time, and which published a report about the shortcomings of the current offer for people who are in trouble abroad. Too often the government's efforts to secure the release of British nationals unjustly detained abroad have been according to the families themselves, arbitrary, haphazard, uncoordinated, lacking resource and lacking transparency. And we have seen this week a formal apology from the FCDO for its appalling handling of the case of Matthew Hedges. These ongoing individual cases have been raised many times by their respective constituency MPs, and I do wonder if the Minister would outline what learning he personally has made as a result of that apology issued just this week. We must remember that there are many, many others who do not share the same profile of Jagtar Singh Johal or Nazneen Zaghari Ratcliffe or others, but that there is still the legal obligation for the UK government to provide consular assistance to a British citizen, even in cases involving allegations of torture or arbitrary detention, leaving it entirely at the discretion of the Foreign Office and government ministers. This stands in contrast to a number of other countries where it's recognised that a specific right to consular assistance, including, for example, we've looked at examples from German consular outposts and Estonia, so even smaller countries, in some cases, doing a better job. Whether the case is high profile or not, British nationals deserve to have the support of the British government, and I'm proud that Labour's commitment to legislate for a legal right to consular assistance for British nationals in trouble abroad, should we form the next government, will be a keystone of our foreign policy. Until then, ministers must do more to reassure British nationals that they will be supported. Many members in the debate have highlighted the cases that have been put on record on a number of cases. We share the concern about Jimmy Lai. We've had the meetings with their counsel, and we've met Sebastian Lai, who's desperate about the situation of his father, wrongly imprisoned for freedom of the press. And of course, we also know that with the G20 coming up in India, this is a great opportunity for the UK government to highlight the case of Jagtar Singh Johal. On Murad Tabaz, we understand that he's been released into house arrest, but could the Minister give an update to the House today on that? I know that Mr Tabaz is also a US citizen and the State Department has led negotiations, but could the Minister update us on the UK's role and whether we can expect he will be allowed to leave Iran soon? And finally, on Alaa Abd El Fattah, for 2 years Egypt has continued to deny his basic right to consular access as a British citizen and paid no diplomatic price for doing so. After the Prime Minister raised this in person with President Sisi 10 months ago, does the government have any concrete plans or an update for the House to secure access beyond raising it in meetings? And has the government considered amending its travel advice to warn British nationals about its inability to guarantee the provision of consular support to them in the event that they themselves are detained, particularly if they are dual nationals? I conclude my remarks here and note the cross-party consensus here in the Chamber, Ms Ali, and the commitment to seeing a better deal for Britons detained abroad.
Minister Leo Doherty.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ms Ali. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and of course I'm here in the place of the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for the Americas and the Caribbean, who has a responsibility for consular policy, but he's travelling, so I'm very pleased to be here in his place, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Member from St Helens South for securing this debate and for the passionate contributions of other colleagues across this chamber. So let me begin, Ms Ali, by setting out some general principles of our consular and detention policy before covering off some of the specific questions asked about individual cases. Of course, consular assistance to British nationals abroad remains at the heart of our work at the FCDO. Our trained staff are contactable 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and they offer really empathetic and professional support tailored to each individual case. They have a huge caseload, some 20 to 30,000 cases on an annual basis. And of course, we will continue to review and improve the service they offer. And of course, we always welcome feedback on how it can be improved. Consular staff help around 3,000 British nationals who have been arrested or detained abroad each year, and their welfare and their human rights are our top priorities. Consular officials are contactable 24/7, including if a British national is detained, and our support can include seeking consular access and providing relevant information to detainees, and we can also raise specific consular cases with foreign authorities and support the families of those detained. And of course, this is considered on a case-by-case basis. So I should like to be very clear that we thank our consular staff for the tremendous work they continue to do. And as a general principle, we are guided by international law and the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. Our ability to offer support in a particular country is, of course, constrained by the laws and practice of that country. In detention cases, the detaining authority has jurisdiction and control over detained British nationals, and the British government may not interfere in the foreign legal process. But we can and do intervene when British nationals are not treated in line with international standards or where there are unreasonable delays in proceedings. There are a number of areas where consular staff, of course, sadly cannot help. We cannot offer to pay for legal services, pay outstanding fines, or ask for British citizens to receive preferential treatment on the basis of their nationality. But we do provide tailored support to detainees who raise allegations of torture or mistreatment, something we take incredibly seriously. Although we cannot investigate such allegations ourselves, we will, with the detainee's permission, raise our concerns with the local authorities and request an investigation. And last year, the FCDO received 133 new allegations of torture or mistreatment from British nationals overseas. Each year, we conduct a review of all such cases to identify trends and develop strategies to engage with relevant countries. So, delighted.
That includes the accusation of torture against my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal, who is found in the Indian Republic.
Yes, indeed. We consider all these cases, and if I may, let me come on to that case, because he has been a champion of this case, and let me assure him that, as I'm sure he knows, the government has raised concerns about Mr. Johal's case with the government of India, including allegations of torture and his right to a fair trial on over 100 occasions, and we will continue to do so. We take the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention's opinion in this case very seriously. We have consistently raised concerns about Mr. Johal directly with the Indian authorities, and we'll continue to do so, as I say. And after having carefully considered the potential benefits and risks to Mr. Johal of calling for his release, as well as the likely effectiveness of doing so, we do not believe this course of action would be in his best interests. So as I said, we will continue to raise his case with the government of India. Let me turn now to two cases mentioned by the Labour Front Bench and the Honourable Member for St Helens. Firstly, the case of Murad Tahbaz in Iran. We are pleased to see British national Murad Tahbaz has been released on furlough. This is a first step, and we remain focused on his permanent release. Of course, the UK is not party in negotiations between the US and Iran, and the details of any agreement are a bilateral matter for those two countries, but we do think that his release on furlough is a positive step. Turning now to the case of Mehran Rauf, again in Iran, we are supporting the family of Mr. Rauf, who's a British-Iranian national, who was detained in Iran since 2020, and of course his welfare remains a top priority. It remains entirely within Iran's gift to release any British national who's been unfairly detained, and so we should urge Iran to stop this practice of unfairly detaining British and other foreign nationals and urge them to release Mr. Rauf. Turning now to Mr. Alaa Abdel Fattah in Egypt, of course we remain committed to securing consular access for dual British Egyptian national and human rights defender Alaa Abdel Fattah. We continue to raise Mr. Al Fattah's case at the highest levels with the Egyptian government. We remain committed to supporting him and his family, and the Foreign Secretary met family members on the 6th of February. And Lord Ahmed met family members, has met them several times, most recently on the 6th of July. Our ambassador in Cairo and consulate officials are in regular contact with family members and most recently met on the 5th of April. And, of course, we will continue to offer all consular support that we can. I was very grateful for my honourable friend from Shrewsbury for raising the case of his constituent, Mr. Saif al-Chaudhry. Of course, I give him my absolute assurance that we will be happy to correspond and raise this case. And if we could exchange details after the session, we look forward to corresponding with that case, and we look forward to offering any support we can to Mr. Saif al-Chowdhury. So I'm grateful for him raising that case. Turning now to the case of Jimmy Lai, which was raised by several members this afternoon. Let me be very clear. We are using our channels with the Chinese and Hong Kong authorities to raise Mr. Lai's detention and request consular access. Minister Trevelyan last met Mr. Lai's son and his international legal team on the 24th of April, and officials continue to provide support. We continue to make clear to mainland Chinese and Hong Kong authorities our strong opposition to the national security law, which is being used to curtail freedoms, punish dissent, and shrink the space for opposition, free press, and civil society. And of course, the Foreign Secretary raised Jimmy Lai's detention with Chinese Vice President Han Zheng on 5th of May and in his opening statement at the 52nd session of the UN Human Rights Council on the 27th of February. So we will continue to raise this case and others. Ms. Ali, delighted.
I thank the Minister for giving way. In the course of this debate, it's been raised the question of whether the Foreign Office considers Mr. Lai to be a British national. And I wonder whether the Minister could please elaborate on that, because it is key to the sort of approach which we in this House take, but also which legally the Foreign Office should be taking. If I could briefly say as well, Ms. Ali, that I've met the wonderful leader of the Hong Kong mission, and I know he's doing his utmost, but it really does have to be pushed at a much more senior level in order to get a result, and I know that that's the view of the House.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I will reiterate the language used by the Foreign Secretary and referred to by the Right Honourable Member for Chingford. Mr. Lai is a dual British national, born in China, and the reality of the matter is that Chinese nationality laws are very clear. They do not recognise dual nationality, and therefore have not allowed us consular access to Mr. Lai. And we are therefore using our channels with the Chinese and Hong Kong authorities to continue to raise his case. Delighted to give way.
Very clearly, the question was, does the British government recognise him as a British citizen and passport holder? The answer came back, there's a dual national. The Chinese government says he's a dual national and doesn't recognise it. So what does the British government say? Is he a British citizen and a British passport holder? That was the question.
Mr. Lai has a British passport. He is a dual British national,
born
in China.
Dual national. He never was.
He's a dual British national, and we will continue to.
He never was a dual national.
We will continue to use our channels with the Chinese and Hong Kong authorities to raise his case and call for his release. Thank you.
Thank you. Marie Rimmer to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank everyone for contributing today, because it is an important matter, this, something that has duly deserved the attention it's had today, and hopefully we can get some movement from government, and if we can get this man's citizenship sorted, I think he should know, his family will know his citizenship more than anyone, not far more better than the Chinese would know. It's purely a con, isn't it? But thank you so much for contributing today, and I think we need to keep going. We need to do this as soon as possible. So please grab hold of it if you like. We'd congratulate you if you got it started now, wouldn't we?
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered British nationals detained overseas. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.